How can you tell when a politician is lying? Their lips are moving. Right on cue, April 16th. Prime Minister Albanese steps up to the podium and delivers this stunning announcement. I can announce that my government has secured an additional 100 million litres of diesel. One shipment from Brunei, one from South Korea. 100 million litres. Sounds massive, right? That's the point. They picked litres on purpose. Because big numbers make great headlines and dazzle people too exhausted from paying their mortgage to grab a calculator. Well, I grabbed mine. And when you convert that number into something that actually matters, days of national supply, 100 million litres can't keep this country running for 26 hours. 26 hours. That's the grand rescue. They think we're stupid? Stay right here, because I'm about to hand you something called the Litres-to-Lies decoder. And once you have it, they will never fool you with a number again. Here's how it works. One number. That's all you need. 159. That's how many litres fit inside a single barrel of oil. And in the global energy industry, every refinery, every tanker contract, every OPEC communique, the unit of trade is the barrel. Always has been. Nobody in the professional oil world talks in litres. Nobody. So when the Prime Minister's official media release, dated April 16th, 2026, straight from pm.gov.au, proudly announces, quote, approximately 100 million litres of additional diesel for Australians. Your very first question should be, why litres? I'll tell you why. Because 100 million sounds enormous. It sounds like a rescue mission. It sounds like leadership. Now let's run it through the decoder. Grab your calculator. 100 million litres divided by 159 litres per barrel. What do you get? 629,000 barrels. That's it. That giant, chest-thumping 100 million litre headline just shrank to 629,000 barrels. Still sounds like a decent haul? Hold that thought. Here's your baseline. And this isn't my number. This is the official consumption figure. Australia burns through anywhere from 500 to 580,000 barrels of diesel every single day. Every single day. And realistically, we're running at the higher end of that range. 580,000 barrels a day to keep this country's trucks moving, farms running, mines operating, hospitals powered. Now the kill shot. Divide that glorious 629,000 barrels by our daily burn rate. 629,000 divided by 580,000. You get 1.08 days, 26 hours. That is what 100 million litres actually buys this country. 26 hours before the trucks stop, the shelves empty, and the backup generators go silent. They dressed up a single day's supply in a big shiny number and paraded it like a diplomatic triumph. They swapped barrels for litres because 629,000 doesn't make a good headline. 100 million does. That is the entire trick. They think we're stupid, that none of us would ever pull out a calculator and do primary school division. But you just did. So now you can see exactly how fragile that so-called secured supply really is. One day. And here's what should genuinely keep you up tonight. That one pathetic day of diesel didn't materialize out of thin air. Somebody, somewhere on this planet, agreed to part with it. The question you need to ask next is, who? And what did Australia have to give up to scrape scraps this small off somebody else's table? South Korea and Brunei. That's who threw us a bone. One medium-sized tanker each. Roughly half a day of diesel per country. Half. Tama a day. We didn't negotiate some masterful energy deal. We caught whatever fell off the back of someone else's truck. The crumbs after everyone else has eaten. But here's what they really don't want you to know. The rot underneath is far worse than dodgy unit conversions. You'd assume Australia, one of the wealthiest nations on Earth, an IEA member, would have a sovereign strategic reserve in bunkers somewhere. Every other IEA member does. 90 days of emergency supply, owned and controlled by the state. Australia has zero. None. Canberra doesn't own or control a single litre. Instead of building one, our government passed the buck to private oil companies, slapped minimum stockholding obligations on them under the Fuel Security Act and called it a day. Picture this. No national grain reserve, no government silos. Famine hits, And the official plan is to walk into Coles, point at the 2 bags of flour on the shelf and go, "That's our food security strategy. That's what we're doing with diesel." Betting the country's energy security on whatever private companies have in commercial inventory. Stock already earmarked for sale, already spoken for. How much of this buffer do we actually have? As of late March 2026, roughly 30 days, the IEA minimum is 90, with the lowest of any member nation, the only country that chronically fails the threshold. That safety net everyone assumes exists? Paper, theatre, a number on a spreadsheet that wouldn't survive a single serious disruption. And with 30 days and a supply chain held together with sticky tape, the last thing you'd want is a refinery crisis. Australia has 2 left. 2 for the entire continent. So when one literally catches fire while we're on this razor's edge, you'd expect every resource thrown at the emergency. Instead, the government's first move was to spend millions of taxpayer dollars on advertising. That story deserves its own spotlight. Stay with me. So, while our Prime Minister is halfway across Asia on his diplomatic victory lap, I'm sitting at home, April 16th, watching breaking news footage I cannot look away from. The Viva Energy Refinery in Geelong, Corio, one of the last 2 refineries on this entire continent. And the aerial shots show flames ripping through processing units so violent you can see the glow from suburbs away. 13 hours that thing burned. 13 hours I sat there watching, thinking, does anyone in Canberra even know this is happening? Or are they too busy drafting the next press release from Jakarta? Here's what that fire left us with. 1 refinery. Lytton, up in Brisbane. Let me break this down. Lytton produces roughly 10% of our national fuel. And most of that? Petroleum, not diesel. The stuff that actually moves your food from warehouse to shelf, keeps the trucks running, keeps the generators humming when the grid wobbles. We are producing almost none of it domestically now. Strait of Hormuz choked, imports barely trickling. Our only backup refinery in ashes. So, picture this split screen. On one side, the smoking wreckage of Corio, 13 hours of flames. Our refining backbone in ruins. On the other side, suited Canberra officials standing in front of cameras they paid $20 million of your dollars to book. Filming ads that tell you to stop panic buying, to pump up your tires, to take the roof racks off your car. They spent your money to call their catastrophe your fault. How stunning is that? And honestly, what is the most insulting thing a government has ever blamed you for? Drop it in the comments. I know you've got stories, but here's where it stops being a Canberra circus and starts bleeding into your actual life. The fires, the empty reserves, the zero strategy. It all rolls downhill, straight into the price of diesel, which means straight into every single thing a truck delivers to your local Coles. Your groceries, your power bill, your mortgage. And that is exactly where we're headed next. Since 2000, Australia has gone from 8 oil refineries down to 2. An IEFA report puts it bluntly. We've lost 75% of our refining capacity. We now produce 17% of our own fuel. 17%. And those shuttered refineries? Demolished. Land rezoned. Engineers gone overseas. That capacity is dead, permanently. Which means we are structurally locked into importing the most expensive diesel on the planet, from the very back of the global queue, for the rest of our lives. They think we're too stupid to connect these dots, but let me break down exactly where this hits you. Every litre of overpriced imported diesel feeds into freight costs. Freight feeds into every bag of potatoes on the shelf at Coles, every carton of milk, every slab of timber on a building site. It feeds into tradie quotes, construction budgets, housing developments. And when all of that stays expensive month after month, inflation stays stubborn. When inflation stays stubborn, the Reserve Bank keeps interest rates painful, which means the mortgage you're already white-knuckling through every single month just keeps grinding you further into the ground. You're paying, with interest, for their PR stunts and cover-ups. Every single repayment. So here's what I need from you. If this finally showed you the real maths behind the spin, don't just nod and scroll on. Share it. Send it to the mate who still thinks 100 million litres of fuel reserve sounds impressive. Send it to your parents who bought that headline without ever seeing the actual maths. The Litres-to-Lies decoder is your defense weapon, your I told you so, with receipts. And the more of us carrying it, the harder it gets for anyone to keep playing us with big numbers and empty promises.